Good evening, dear listener. As the world outside slows down to a whisper, I invite you to find your most comfortable spot. Perhaps adjust your blanket, take a slow sip of warm tea, and gently rest your head on your pillow. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the quietness settle over you like a soft, familiar blanket. Tonight, we're about to embark on a strange and intriguing journey, one that whispers of ancient markets and curious customs hidden behind a veil of shadows and flickering torchlight. Imagine a scene where the air is thick with anticipation, not unlike the rush of a crowded marketplace at dawn, except this place is shrouded in a gentle fog of mystery. There's a strange hum, a murmur of voices and hurried footsteps, all blending into a symphony of anticipation. Perhaps you see flickering lanterns casting long, dancing shadows over cobblestones slick with rain. A faint aroma of roasted meats and spiced herbs drifts past, mingling with the hum of distant chatter and the rustling of fabric. Tonight's story hints at a day when the usual humdrum of life was replaced by an extraordinary frenzy. An event so peculiar, it might remind you of waiting in line for hours, clutching your purse as the world spins around you. But this is no ordinary shopping spree. No, it's something far more curious, an event that in its own way captures the chaos, the thrill, and the strange ritual of a time when the most coveted treasures were not digital, but tangible and often just as elusive. And as your eyes grow heavy, you'll soon wake not in your bed, but in a place where the air is thick with smoke, herbs, and fear, and where your role will be far stranger than anything you've known. You blink slowly, and suddenly the world around you comes into focus, though not quite as you remember it. Your skin feels rough and coarse, like burlap stretched tight over a frame of unyielding wood. Beneath you, the ground is uneven, a patchwork of cold, damp stones and splintered, splashed mud. You shift slightly, feeling the gritty texture of dirt caked into your fingertips, the faint prick of straw or hay pressed against your back, perhaps a threadbare blanket or a hastily thrown cloak. The scent is immediate and overwhelming, a heavy mixture of smoky incense, burning herbs, sweat-soaked fabrics, and something fouler, perhaps the sour tang of spoiled meat or the acrid sting of vinegar that lingers in the air, clinging like an unwelcome shadow. Your senses are assaulted from every direction. Light filters through a maze of timber beams and mismatched shutters, casting jagged shadows that dance like phantoms across the crumbling walls. The flickering glow of a nearby torch or an oil lamp creates a shifting mosaic of warmth and shadow, illuminating faces, some lined with worry, others with fevered exhaustion. You hear a chorus of sounds, the distant clang of blacksmiths hammering metal, the muffled groans of someone in pain, the hurried footsteps of villagers rushing past, their voices raised in urgent whispers or shouted commands. Somewhere, a child's laughter echoes briefly before dissolving into the background hum of a bustling marketplace. The air is thick with a tapestry of odors, smoke curling from a hearth, the sharp bite of herbal poultices, the pungent aroma of unwashed bodies, and the faint, sickly, sweet smell of rotting flesh from some forgotten corner. Your nose twitches at the acrid sting of burnt herbs, mixed with the stale scent of sweat and dirt. You can almost taste the dryness on your tongue, a faint metallic tang that might be from the rough, coarse bread you had to chew, or the bitter, sour wine lingering in your mouth. The texture of your clothing is rough and scratchy, wool that itches, leather that resists your touch, stiff and unforgiving. It's strange how different this feels from your modern mornings when your biggest concern was whether your coffee was strong enough or if your phone had enough battery. Here, your idea of a bad start might be realizing your mask smells worse than the patients you're supposed to help, or that your boots are soaked through from the muddy street. Perhaps yesterday's worries about Wi-Fi or traffic jams seem downright trivial now, replaced by the reality of survival in a place where comfort is a luxury and every breath is a gamble. You sit up carefully, wincing at the stiffness in your limbs. The air is chilly, and you instinctively reach out, your hand brushing against rough wooden beams and a patchwork of fabrics and rougher materials, before you find a simple, coarse cloak or tunic nearby. With a cautious grasp, you pull it over your head, feeling the scratch of fibers against your skin. It's not much, but it's enough to make you feel a little less exposed to the biting cold. Now you rise slowly, your feet touching the uneven, damp stones beneath you. You take a deep breath and attempt to anchor yourself amid the chaos and feel the cool air fill your lungs. You notice the sounds growing louder as you move, the clatter of carts, the chatter of merchants loudly hawking their wares, and the distant tolling of a bell or a church steeple echoing across the narrow streets. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rings out repeatedly, each strike sharp and rhythmic like a heartbeat, while the shrill cry of a hawker urges passers-by to buy or sell, to barter or trade. You glance around the small scene before you. Dozens of figures, men, women, children, hustle and bustle through the crowded streets. Some are dressed in bright, layered fabrics, their cloaks and hats adding flashes of color amid the muddy browns and grays of the surroundings. Others look worn and weary, faces lined with dirt and exhaustion. A few soldiers, clad in chainmail or simple leather armor, stand at attention or argue quietly over a disputed fare. Dozens of shops and stalls spill out onto the street, their goods, spices, bolts of cloth, iron tools displayed in chaotic profusion. A baker's cart emits a warm, yeasty aroma, while a butcher's stall oozes the scent of fresh blood and game. People glance at you, some with curiosity, others with suspicion or indifference. Their eyes linger briefly on whatever strange attire you might be wearing, whether a simple cloak, a mask that covers half your face, or an odd object you carry. It's clear that you are part of this scene now, woven into the fabric of their busy lives, yet you feel the strange weight of being an outsider, someone caught in a moment that is both ordinary and extraordinary in its own peculiar way. And as you stand there, observing, listening, sensing, something becomes clear. This is not just a snapshot of a day in a village or a town. To truly understand where you've just woken up, we need to take a step back to see the bigger picture, a world shaped by customs, fears, and routines that stretch far beyond this bustling street. But for now, just breathe in this moment. Feel the texture of history beneath your fingertips, the scent of a time long past, and the strange, faint thrill of being caught in the midst of something peculiar, and yet somehow familiar. The era you've woken up in is roughly the late Middle Ages, a time when the echoes of crusades still reverberate through the stone corridors of kingdoms, and the shadows of feudal lords stretch long across sprawling, patchwork landscapes. Imagine the 14th or 15th century, an age where kings and queens hold the strings of power, but the true rulers are often the local lords and the church, whose influence is woven into every aspect of daily life. It's a period marked by a curious mixture of grandeur and squalor, where the richest noble might live in a castle that looks like a fortress out of a fairy tale, while the poorest villagers scrape by in mud-brick hovels that could collapse with a sneeze. The society is a rigid pyramid, with the clergy and the nobility perched at the top, wielding authority through divine right or sheer force. The church isn't just a place of worship, it's the social hub, the court of law, and the moral compass, all rolled into one. The clergy wield immense influence, often dictating what's right and wrong, even as they tend to their own scandals behind cloistered walls. Beneath them are the mercantile class, craftsmen, tradesmen, and shopkeepers, who serve as the economic backbone, trading everything from spices and textiles to livestock and tools. Below them, the peasantry toils away, their lives dictated by seasons, crop yields, and the whims of their lords. Riches and poverty are worlds apart, separated by an almost comical chasm. The wealthiest noble might indulge in banquets that last for days, feasting on roasted boar, spiced pies, and sweetmeats, while the peasant's meal is a rough loaf of bread, some cheese, and whatever roots or vegetables can be gleaned from the dirt. The disparity is so stark that it's almost humorous. Imagine a noble lounging in a hall that's more palace than house, while the farmhands share a single, smoky hut, their beds mere piles of straw. Power is a delicate dance of alliances, loyalty, and sheer luck. The king's word is law, but it's often the local baron or the bishop who pulls the real strings. Nobles and clergy hold court, issuing decrees and collecting taxes, while the common folk survive on chance and resilience. A bad harvest, an angry lord, or a sudden invasion can turn a life from relatively comfortable to desperate overnight. And in the background, wars brew, sometimes openly, sometimes in whispers, across borders and kingdoms, with armies marching on muddy roads, banners fluttering, and the occasional clash of steel echoing through the countryside. The landscape itself is a patchwork of cities, towns, and sprawling fields that stretch as far as the eye can see, dotted with churches and market squares that buzz like a marketplace on Black Friday. Except here, there are more pigs than shoppers, and the noise is punctuated by the clatter of carts, the bleating of sheep, and the clanging of blacksmiths' hammers. Cities are crowded and chaotic, filled with narrow, winding streets paved with uneven cobblestones, some slick with mud, others with refuse. Markets are lively, fragrant, and sometimes overwhelming, with vendors shouting over each other, trying to sell everything from fresh fish to embroidered cloaks. The rhythm of life is dictated by the church and the seasons. Dawn often begins with the tolling of bells or the crowing of roosters, summoning villagers to work, prayer, or market. The days are filled with repetitive labor, ploughing, tending animals, weaving, and baking, each task as predictable as the sunrise. Rest is scarce, and taking a bath was almost suspicious, like announcing to your neighbors that you might be planning something shady. Instead, cleanliness was a matter of practicality or superstition, with many believing that bathing too often could invite illness or bad luck. If you wanted to feel fresh, you might rinse your face or wash your hands quickly, but a full wash was a rare luxury, reserved for the truly desperate or the wealthy. Your modern frustrations, such as waiting in traffic or trying to get your Wi-Fi to connect, are laughably insignificant compared to trying to light a damp fire in the rain or carrying buckets of water up a hill every morning. Forget about gyms. Your daily exercise was hauling water, chopping wood, and working in the fields, CrossFit, medieval style, and without the shiny equipment. Life was a constant cycle of physical effort, punctuated by religious festivals, saints' days, and occasional celebrations that brought villagers together in a burst of music, dance, and prayer. These festivals often involved strange rituals, from processions winding through the streets to bonfires that seemed to dance with the shadows of the past. Politically, the world was a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, each vying for dominance, often through wars, alliances, or invasion. The concept of centralized government was fragile. Power was held by a handful of monarchs, crowned by divine right, yet often dependent on the loyalty of a handful of noble families. The authority of the church added another layer, sometimes aligning with kings, sometimes opposing them, but always wielding immense influence over every decision, every war, and every superstition. Plagues and famines swept through these lands, leaving devastation in their wake, while armies clashed over borders and resources, leaving scars on the landscape and the psyche of the people. Superstitions and odd beliefs thrived in this era. Some believed that carrying a handful of onions in your pocket could ward off the plague, organic medicine they called it. Others swore that sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar was safer than practicing social distancing, which in those days was more about avoiding the sick than avoiding the virus. Masks, but make it medieval with beak-like contraptions filled with herbs, were thought to keep the miasma, poisonous air, away from your lungs, even if they looked more like bizarre bird beaks than protective gear. As you sit quietly in this world with its strange rituals and turbulent history, remember this was a time where survival depended on a mixture of faith, luck, and resilience. The structures of power, the customs, the fears, they all coalesced into a reality that might seem absurd from your modern perspective, yet was utterly vital to those living within it. Now that you understand the vastness of this world, its hopes and fears, its chaos and order, we can begin to zoom in, down to the very fabric of daily life, the routines of ordinary people trying to make sense of a universe filled with saints, devils, and the unpredictable hand of fate itself. As you slowly open your eyes to the muted light filtering through a small, rough-hewn window, the first thing you notice is the coolness of the air against your skin, a reminder that the sun has yet to fully rise over the thatched roof of your modest dwelling. Your body stirs with a sluggish ache, muscles stiff from yesterday's toil, and you instinctively stretch, feeling the faint crackle of your worn, itchy blanket beneath you. The bed is nothing more than a thick layer of straw and old cloth, a humble nest that offers little comfort, but it's yours. You sit up, and the air hits your face like a splash of icy water, the kind that makes your eyes water and your nose twitch. Your first task is to find water, cold, clear, and stored in a wooden basin that's rough to the touch, the grains of oak and pine pressing against your fingertips. With a practiced hand, you dip your fingers into the basin, feeling the chill seep into your skin, a wake-up call sharper than any modern alarm. You splash the water onto your face, the sensation sharp and bracing, no gentle splash of a fancy sink, just a handful of frigid liquid that stings and awakens every nerve. You wipe your face with a coarse cloth rough and scratchy against your skin, no soft microfiber here, just linen or wool, stiff and unforgiving, like wiping your face with a piece of burlap. There's no soap, no fragrant wash, only the simple act of rinsing and hoping that the faint smell of damp wool and herbs doesn't offend anyone nearby. The idea of a luxurious shower or scented body wash is as foreign as the idea of a spa day. Here, survival might be splashing some water and crossing your fingers that the smell doesn't chase off the neighbors. In this humble space, the atmosphere is thick with the scent of burning wood, the faint aroma of herbs drying near the hearth, and the lingering smell of yesterday's smoke still clinging to the beams. The walls are dark and rough, made of wattle and daub, with patches of moss and dirt pressed into the cracks. The furniture is sparse, a sturdy wooden bench, a small table, perhaps a chest that doubles as storage and a seat. The fireplace crackles softly, sending occasional sparks into the smoky air, filling the room with a faint, earthy aroma of burnt logs and charred bits. Utensils of clay and iron are scattered nearby, their surfaces scarred from years of use. The entire space hums with the sounds of waking life, the creak of old wooden stairs, the distant clatter of pots and pans, the soft murmur of prayers or curses from the next room. Every sound is punctuated by the occasional whistle of the wind through the cracks, a reminder that comfort here is a fleeting luxury. Your clothes are simple: rough wool tunic, coarse linen trousers, and heavy leather shoes that feel like they've been shaped by years of squeezing into them. The fabric is stiff and itchy, like hugging a hedgehog, and every movement makes the fibers rub against your skin, reminding you that your body is not as flexible or pampered as the modern version. You might feel a faint itch or a cold spot where the fabric is thicker, but you've grown used to it. The discomfort is just part of the routine, like a badge of endurance. Your skin reacts with a mild prickling from the cool air, and a slight shiver runs down your spine, especially if the morning is especially chilly. Your modern idea of comfortable clothing, soft, stretchable and seamless, feels like an alien concept here. Instead, wool that feels like hugging a hedgehog is the norm, and you accept it with a resigned sigh, knowing that this is just how things are. Now your stomach rumbles, reminding you it's time for breakfast. You reach for a piece of bread, dried, dense, and hard enough to break a tooth if you're not careful, and a small chunk of aged cheese, its flavor sharp and tangy, a taste of days gone by. Maybe you sip a bit of cold, cloudy water from a clay cup, the flavor faintly metallic, like drinking from a rusty tin. The meal is simple, but enough to get you through the day. No fancy coffee here, just sustenance. It's a far cry from your modern mornings of toast, eggs, and freshly brewed coffee, but you know that here, survival is a slow, gritty process, not a hurried rush. In this world, hygiene is less about cleanliness and more about ritual, superstition, or necessity. Many believe that frequent bathing invites illness or weakness, so washing was often a rare event, sometimes only a quick splash of water on the face or rinsing your hands before meals. A full bath was considered suspicious, almost like announcing to everyone that you were plotting something shady. Instead, people relied on perfumes, herbs, and incense to purify the air and mask the smells of sweat, dirt, and toil. You might have a small pouch of dried herbs, lavender, rosemary, or sage, that you crush and sprinkle around your space or dab behind your ears, trying to preserve a semblance of freshness. Vinegar is a common household item, used to rinse clothes, clean wounds, or even as a kind of deodorant. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, it's splash some water, sprinkle a bit of herbs, and hope the aroma doesn't offend the neighbors. Your home is a humble sanctuary. Walls of dark, weathered wood, the air thick with the scent of burning logs and damp earth. The floor is uneven, creaking beneath your feet as you move around. The furniture is sturdy but plain, nothing plush, just rough-hewn tables, benches, and a few clay jars holding grains or dried herbs. The windows are small, with wooden shutters that you open or close to control the light and the cold. When the fire in the hearth crackles and pops, the room fills with a warm, smoky aroma that seems to settle deep into the shadows. It's a space designed more for practicality than comfort, a place where dirt and dust accumulate and where every object has a purpose, from the battered cooking pot to the faded tapestry hanging on the wall. The textures are coarse, rough wood, coarse linen, the uneven surface of clay pottery, and every touch reminds you that comfort is a luxury you must earn. Standing in this space, you can feel every fiber of your clothing against your skin, every ache in your bones, every scent that drifts in from the street, earthy, smoky, and a little bit wild. Your body responds with a mix of fatigue and resilience, stiff from the cold, itchy from the rough fabric, but somehow still alive. Your skin might itch from the wool, your fingers stiff from the morning cold, yet you press on, knowing that this is just the beginning of another day, in this strange, resilient world. Ironically, your modern idea of a perfect morning, sipping coffee in a soft shirt, enjoying a warm shower, feels utterly alien here. Instead, you're wrapped in layers of rough fabric, rubbing elbows with the scent of smoke and herbs, and starting your day with a meal that's more sustenance than pleasure. It's a slow, deliberate rhythm, one where every movement is grounded in necessity and endurance, where cleanliness is a matter of superstition or habit, and where comfort takes a backseat to survival. And yet, despite the roughness, there's a strange beauty in the simplicity, an honesty in the textures, a warmth in the smoky glow of the fire, and a quiet resilience in every breath you take. Because ultimately, this is life unfiltered, raw, gritty, and real. An intimate glimpse into a world where every day begins with a ritual of persistence and ends with the hope that you've done enough to face whatever challenges lie ahead. With that, you're ready to step outside, to face the world beyond these four walls, where the real work, the real stories, and the real struggles await. But for now, breathe in this moment of quiet, of routine, and of life in its most unvarnished form. As you step out of your humble dwelling, the cool morning air greets you like an unwelcome but familiar visitor. A faint mist hangs over the village, swirling lazily like the breath of some great sleeping beast, softening the edges of the thatched rooftops and muddy streets. The ground beneath your feet is a patchwork of uneven stones, slick and blackened by last night's rain, mixed with patches of sticky mud that cling stubbornly to the soles of your shoes. Dust rises in tiny whirlwinds with each step, swirling into the air like the dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. Except here, the sun is still shy behind a veil of clouds, and the breeze carries a faint, earthy scent of damp soil and decaying leaves. As you move toward the busy streets, you notice the hum of activity rising like a low, steady drone. Merchants shouting over each other, children squealing as they dart between carts, and the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. Your cloak and tools, perhaps a leather satchel filled with herbs or a small wooden mask with a beak, are already in place, ready for the day's work. The morning is neither harsh nor gentle. It's a dry, brisk kind of cold that makes your nose tingle and your breath fog the air. The sky remains dull, but the promise of a bustling day pushes you onward. Today, your role in this community is clear, defined by necessity and the customs that have shaped centuries of life. Whether you are a healer, a merchant, a craftsman, or some other vital figure, your purpose is woven into the fabric of daily survival. You are expected to serve, to heal, to protect, or perhaps, in some cases, to keep ominous threats at bay. Children stare at you, half curious, half terrified, eyebrows raised at your strange attire or the peculiar objects you carry. Some whisper behind their hands, casting nervous glances your way. Others, braver or more innocent, run up to ask questions, tugging at your sleeve or offering shy smiles. You're a familiar sight to many, yet your presence still commands a mixture of reverence, suspicion, and sometimes outright fear, depending on the day and the mood of the town. Your journey begins at the edge of the marketplace, which sprawls like a living organism, stalls of woven fabrics, barrels of dried herbs, and tables piled high with fresh produce. The scent of roasted meats and sweet pastries drifts lazily through the air, mingling with the pungent aroma of livestock and the sharp tang of spilled wine. Traders shout their prices, their voices rising and falling like the tide. Spices from the east, fresh bread, wool for your winter coat. The sound of haggling, laughter, and the occasional curse fills the space, creating a symphony of commerce that's more chaotic than any modern supermarket on a Black Friday. Here, the pace is relentless but rhythmic, each person playing their part in the grand dance of survival. Your task today might be to visit the sick in their homes, those unfortunate souls struck down by fevers, or perhaps the victims of some unseen, creeping illness. You carry your tools, a small pouch of dried herbs, a vial of vinegar, a wooden staff with carved symbols, strange to others, but familiar to you. As you walk through the narrow, winding streets, your presence is always marked. People glance at you with a cautious respect, sometimes with a flicker of fear. Children dart away when they see your mask or your strange, weighted bag, whispering stories about witches and healers. The elders nod knowingly, offering a humble bow or a quiet greeting, while the wealthier merchants eye your equipment with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. You might stop at a house with a thatched roof, the door opening to reveal a sick child or an elderly person trembling in bed. You kneel, feeling the roughness of the wooden floor beneath your knees, and listen to the coughs, the wheezing, the faint, labored breathing. Each visit involves inspecting symptoms, feeling the forehead for heat, examining the pulse, and smelling the air for signs of infection. Your senses sharpened by years of practice. You decide which herbs to burn, which poultices to prepare, and which charms or prayers to offer. Sometimes you burn a bundle of dried sage or rosemary near the sickbed, the smoke curling upward like ghostly serpents, meant to chase away evil spirits or the miasma believed to cause disease. You might pour a few drops of vinegar into a cup for the patient to sip, or apply a poultice of crushed herbs to their forehead. Sensations sharp and earthy, the rough textures of the herbal bundles pressing into the skin. As you go about your tasks, you are keenly aware of the reactions you elicit. The villagers treat you with a mixture of deference and suspicion. Children hide behind their mothers' skirts when you approach, their wide eyes flickering with a blend of awe and fear. The elders, however, sometimes nod in respect, recognizing your role as a healer, though they also whisper warnings about the dangers of meddling with unseen forces. Some villagers believed that carrying a cane wasn't just support. Many thought it was for poking the sick at a safe distance, avoiding direct contact with their ailments. Others swore that smoking herbs inside the beak of your mask would keep the disease away, like medieval aromatherapy, but with more herbs and less glamour. You catch snippets of gossip. He's only a quack, some say, or a witch in disguise, others mutter under their breath. It's a delicate balance. Your presence is vital, but also potentially dangerous, depending on who's watching. The community is alive with activity, the blacksmith pounding away at glowing iron, the miller grinding grain to make bread, the farmers repairing their tools and preparing for the day's labor. Every person has a role, each contributing to the slow, relentless rhythm of life. The market stalls fill with traders offering their wares, the church bells toll at regular intervals, and children's laughter echoes amid the clatter of carts and the call of hawkers. The whole scene feels like a giant puzzle, each piece carefully placed, yet constantly shifting with the seasons, the weather, and the whims of fate. Amidst this bustling tapestry, you perform your duties, checking on the sick, burning herbs, offering prayers, and sometimes simply listening to the stories of those who come seeking aid. Your work is a mixture of science, superstition, and hope, sometimes all three at once. The smells of burning herbs, the rough textures of your clothing, the sharp, acrid taste of vinegar on your tongue, these are the tools of your trade, as familiar as the rising sun. And yet, every day feels like a new chapter in a story where certainty is scarce, and every cure is a gamble against unseen enemies. You might chuckle inwardly at the absurdity of it all. Your work more akin to a game of chance than modern medicine, where luck, faith, and tradition are just as important as the herbs and potions you carry. As you prepare to leave this bustling scene, remember, behind every market stall, every prayer whispered in the shadowed corners of a church, there's a deeper fear and awareness that the unseen forces of disease, misfortune, and superstition shape every moment of life here. To understand what drives these people and their actions, we'll need to step beyond the daily routine and into the realm of beliefs, fears, and hopes that underpin this world. But for now, take a breath, feel the textures, smell the air, and see yourself as part of this ancient, resilient community, doing your part in the endless cycle of life, death, and survival. You feel it in the way people stare at you, eyes darting nervously as if the shadows themselves might leap from behind the thatched roofs. They whisper prayers under their breath, clutching talismans or crossing themselves with trembling hands as you pass by. The air is thick with the scent of incense and damp wood, but beneath that there's a faint, underlying smell of dread. Like the smoke from 100 chimneys, each puff a sigh of collective anxiety. Fear here is the unseen but ever-present fog curling around ankles and seeping into bones, whether you acknowledge it or not. In the churches, the atmosphere is even more oppressive, yet strangely comforting. Masses are packed, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and burning herbs. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, illuminating faces worn with worry and hope. You see the faithful crossing themselves with fervor, signs of the cross traced with trembling fingers, as if this simple gesture could ward off the invisible enemies lurking beyond the walls. Monks chant psalms in deep, resonant voices, their words swirling in the incense-laden air, mingling with the faint aroma of myrrh and frankincense. The rhythmic tolling of the church bells echoes through the streets, a stark reminder of mortality and divine judgment. Every funeral procession, every silent prayer, reinforces the notion that life is fragile, a delicate thread stretched taut over the abyss. Today you might scroll through the scrolls of your mind, or perhaps your modern equivalent, hoping for some comfort in the chaos. But here the people clutch their rosaries as if they were life jackets in a storm, each bead a tiny anchor to hope, each prayer a plea for mercy. Their faith is woven into daily routines, a quick sign of the cross before tending the fields, a whispered prayer before entering a sick room, a handful of holy water sprinkled as protection. Every moment is punctuated by ritual, an act of defiance against the unseen terrors that threaten to engulf them. The images of saints adorn the walls, their eyes watching over the community, offering silent reassurance, or perhaps silent judgment. Superstitions flourish like weeds in a neglected garden, each one a fragile barrier against chaos. Amulets carved from bone or stone hang from necks believed to ward off spirits or the plague itself. Some carry small bundles of herbs, lavender, rosemary, or deadly mandrake, tied tightly with red thread, hoping to keep malevolent forces at bay. Others burn candles or sprinkle holy water in their thresholds, convinced that the very air is poisoned, contaminated by miasma, what they call the foul air, the rotten breath of disease that lurks invisibly. Some believe that the air itself is alive with spirits, either benevolent or malevolent, and that a simple charm, a song or a prayer can keep them at bay. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning or hilarious misapplication. You might chuckle quietly at tales of villagers rubbing garlic behind their ears or carrying a dead toad in their pocket, believed to repel the plague, though most of the time it just made them smell worse. And yet the fears are not just about sickness. They extend into the very fabric of community life, fears of divine punishment, of heretics and witches lurking in shadows, of the devil himself whispering in the dark. The threat of the plague unites and divides in equal measure. Entire neighborhoods turn into battlegrounds of suspicion and accusation. A cough in the marketplace might be met with a sharp eye, suspicion flickering in a neighbor's glance. Accusations of witchcraft or heresy can ignite a frenzy, an angry crowd gathering to lynch the accused, their shouts echoing through the streets like thunder. People flee in panic, abandoning homes or hiding behind locked doors, convinced that the devil's work is behind every misfortune. Communities are always on high alert. Every shadow could be a demon, every misfortune a sign of divine wrath. You, as a healer or a figure of some authority, feel the weight of these fears pressing down on your shoulders. To some, you are a savior. Your prayers, herbs, and rituals a shield against chaos. To others, you are a possible accomplice to the darkness, perhaps even an agent of the devil or a fool tempting divine punishment with your meddling. The whispers follow you, sometimes respectful, sometimes suspicious. Children hide behind their mothers' skirts when you approach, clutching their small charms tightly. The elders nod solemnly, their eyes flickering with a mixture of hope and doubt. The wealthier merchants cast wary glances, clutching their amulets or crossing themselves more vigorously when you're near. You catch the odd sneer or whispered joke. He's only here for the blood, or she's just another witch in disguise. It's a delicate dance, balancing trust and suspicion in a world where a single misstep could mean exile or worse. Odd practices abound, some as bizarre as the fears that fuel them. Some believed carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, though most just ended up smelling like a swamp. Others thought whipping themselves in the streets would earn divine mercy, an extreme form of penance, often leaving them bruised and exhausted, but convinced it would spare their loved ones. People would perform strange rituals, singing hymns while sprinkling herbs or chanting prayers in a language no one fully understood, all in the hope that these acts would turn the tide of divine favor. It's like the medieval version of aromatherapy, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning or setting oneself on fire. The collective fears shape the very fabric of society. The threat of the plague is a unifying force, binding neighbors in a shared dread, yet also a dividing one, fueling accusations, fears of heretics, or the suspicion that the town's recent misfortunes are divine punishment for some hidden sin. Sometimes this fear erupts into violence, lynch mobs forming in the blink of an eye, torchlights flickering as villagers chase supposed witches or heretics through the woods, their shouts echoing under the darkening sky. Other times, entire groups vanish overnight, fleeing in mass panic, leaving behind empty houses and whispered rumors. The community is always on alert, eyes darting, ears straining for the slightest sign of trouble, the cough that sounds more like a death rattle, the flicker of a shadow that might be a demon or just a rat. And you, caught in the eye of this storm, are both a part of it and apart from it. To some, you are a conduit of divine will, prayers and relics in your hands enough to turn back the darkness. To others, a potential cause of the chaos, an outsider, or worse, a heretic. You sense the weight of their gazes, the whispered prayers that seem to follow you like a shadow, the flickering candle flames that seem to dance more fiercely when you pass. They see your tools, herb pouches, relics, or even just your presence, as symbols of hope or fear, sometimes both at once. The community's collective trembling is a reminder that fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys, rising, swirling, and settling into every crevice, whether you want it or not. But even amidst the darkness, there's a strange beauty, a fragile web of faith and superstition that holds the community together. Behind every rumor, every prayer, every fearful glance lies a desperate attempt to find meaning, control, and perhaps salvation. The community is a tapestry woven with threads of hope and despair, stitched together with prayers and fears that have persisted for centuries. And in some quiet corner of this intricate web, you are part of the story, an actor in a play where the stakes are life and death, yet the audience is always watching, always waiting for the next act to unfold. As the shadows lengthen and the evening approaches, you can feel the lingering presence of all these fears, like a gentle, persistent hum beneath the surface of daily life. It's the unseen pulse of a world trembling on the brink, yet somehow still standing. And beyond the prayers and charms, beyond the whispers and accusations, there are bonds, fragile, human, and surprisingly resilient, that keep this world turning. But for now, you carry the weight of fear, an invisible armor that both protects and isolates. The night is coming, and with it the quiet certainty that in this place fear is never far away, no matter how fiercely the candles burn or how fervently the prayers are whispered. In fact, it's often these ties, fragile yet unbreakable, that form the true heartbeat of this community. You notice how, in moments of crisis or routine, individuals lean on each other, not just for bread or warmth, but for the kind of comfort that only another heartbeat nearby can bring. It's a quiet acknowledgement that even in times of plague or famine, no one is truly alone. There's always someone whose shoulder you can rest on, even if only for a moment. Step into a modest cottage where a mother whispers lullabies to her children, her voice soft and soothing amid the crackling hearth. Outside, a grandfather gently strokes the head of a small child, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and worry. Yet he's there, steadfast, anchoring the fragile web of family life. Here, family isn't just a collection of relatives, it's a lifeline. Forget Netflix family drama. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the floor 2 feet from you every single night, sharing not just a bed, but a shared burden of survival. The grandmother, with her wrinkled hands, tends to the sick family member, offering herbs and whispered prayers, her presence a steady pulse in the chaotic rhythm of daily life. The bonds are thick, yet sometimes a little too tight. Obligations, arranged marriages, and shared chores can feel like a chain, binding you to a fate you didn't choose, yet without them, the community might unravel. Family is both your fortress and your prison, a source of comfort and a reminder of the limits of your independence. Across the narrow alley, you see neighbors exchanging a loaf of bread or a bowl of stew, their faces lit by the glow of a single candle. They whisper secrets and advice, sometimes helpful, sometimes suspiciously gossipy. In these moments, friendship is a patchwork of small acts, a hand helping to carry water, a shared smile over a broken wheel, or a quiet exchange of herbs that might just save someone's life. Solidarity blooms in the cracks of suspicion. In times when the plague whispers through the streets, trust becomes a precious commodity, fragile and easily shattered by a rumor or a cough. Still, these fleeting moments of aid remind you that despite the darkness, people still cling to each other, forging bonds that defy the chaos. And what of love? Perhaps it's a glance exchanged behind a veil of smoke in the tavern, or a hurried meeting in the shadows of the churchyard. Romantic promises are whispered under breath, vows of marriage made with trembling hands and hopeful hearts. In a world where death lurks just beyond the horizon, love is both a rebellion and a sanctuary. Try to imagine a courtship where the only swipe is a quick look across a smoky room, and the promise of a dance hangs on whether the fiddler's instrument holds out. Here, courtship might involve stolen moments, a secret meeting beneath the moon, or a simple exchange of tokens, perhaps a preserved flower or a carved bone, each one a symbol of hope in a society that fears the end of everything. Humor sneaks in amid the despair. Tinder swipes? Here, it's a glance across a smoky tavern, and maybe the promise of a dance if the fiddle doesn't break. Hierarchy and status shape these bonds as well. Nobles and peasants, clergy and laity, each group's relationships are defined not only by respect, but by the rigid rules of rank. Nobles may look down on the laborers, yet they rely on them for everything: labor, loyalty, and sometimes the protection of their own lives. The clergy, meanwhile, holds sway over both the spiritual and social realms, respected by some, feared by others. As a plague doctor, you occupy a strange liminal space, revered by those desperate for salvation, yet often regarded with suspicion by those who see you as a walking symbol of death. You're respected for your knowledge, yet never fully trusted. Your mask hiding your face, your tools a mix of healing and fear. Perhaps some villagers believe that your herbs and prayers can save them, while others think you're merely a charlatan or even a servant of the devil. The tension in these relationships is palpable, like a string stretched taut. One misstep and the entire fabric of trust could unravel. Community rituals and gatherings serve as vital moments of connection, whether it's a procession through the village carrying a saint's relic, a lively feast during a festival, or a somber funeral that reminds everyone of mortality. You find yourself woven into these scenes, dressed in your best, whether that's a simple linen tunic or a robe embroidered with symbols of faith. You smell the mix of roasted meats, fresh bread, and the sweet aroma of honey cakes filling the air. Musicians play lively tunes on wood flutes and fiddles, their melodies weaving through the crowd like threads of joy amid the darkness. People clasp hands in dance, their cheeks flushed from the cold and the drink, as the scent of spilled wine mingles with the aroma of baked apples. In these moments, you can feel the pulse of community, the laughter, the tears, the shared hopes and fears. Children run with painted faces, their giggles piercing the heavy air, while elders exchange stories of better days, their voices thick with nostalgia and wisdom. The smell of incense from the church mingles with the smoke of bonfires, and the warmth of human presence offers a small refuge from the ever-present shadow of death. Yet, social tensions simmer beneath the surface. Rivalries over land, disputes about inheritance, or accusations of witchcraft bubble just below the surface of this fragile harmony. You might overhear whispered arguments in the marketplace, or see a neighbor's angry finger pointed at someone accused of dark magic, an easy scapegoat for the community's fears. Sometimes these accusations turn violent, mobs gathering in the square, torches flickering as they chase a supposed witch into the woods. The community's social fabric is as much stitched together by fear as by affection. You notice how, during these tumultuous moments, friendships are tested, alliances formed and broken with startling ease. It's not always warm feelings that hold people together. Sometimes it's a shared suspicion or a mutual desire to survive the next day. The gossip spreads faster than the plague itself, tales of betrayal, jealousy, and secret affairs fueling the ever-present intrigue. Your role as a figure of trust or suspicion lies somewhere in the middle. Some see you as a protector, a healer who can mend both wounds and broken relationships. Others whisper that you might be a source of the curse, an unwitting accomplice to the chaos. Their wary glances and whispered prayers follow you like a shadow, reminding you that trust is as fragile as a spider's web, beautiful when intact, deadly when broken. And yet, in the midst of all this, surprising truths emerge. Some villages believed that sneezing during a wedding, blessings or curses, depended entirely on which grandmother's gossip was more persuasive that day. Others held that public punishments, floggings, stocks, or even mock executions were community events, a twisted form of entertainment that kept everyone in line, like the medieval version of reality TV. These traditions, bizarre and brutal as they sometimes seem, served to reinforce social bonds by shared shame and collective memory, or by the simple act of watching someone suffer together. Humor seeps into these dark corners, offering a momentary escape. Your awkward office party? Try a medieval wedding feast where half the guests are drunk by noon and the other half are arguing over goats. Or, at least your neighbors don't accuse you of witchcraft when your Wi-Fi cuts out. As you reflect on these social ties, woven through everyday life, strengthened by shared rituals and frayed by jealousy and suspicion, you realize that despite the brutal realities of this world, people still find ways to cling to each other. Bonds are forged in fire and fear, in laughter and tears. They are the threads that hold together a community always teetering on the edge of chaos, yet somehow managing to endure. These relationships, fragile as they are, form the true fabric of life here, more enduring than any wall or fortress. And as you prepare to move forward into the next chapter of this story, remember, beneath the superstitions and social hierarchies, it's love, loyalty, and simple human kindness that often prove to be the most powerful forces of all. So, sit with that thought, because if you want to truly understand this world, you need to sit at their table, share their bread, and listen to their stories. For in the end, it's these connections that keep the flame of life flickering amid all the shadows. The morning light filters through small stained windows, casting a warm, amber glow that dances across uneven planks and worn cloths. Before you, a simple spread awaits, its scents whispering promises of sustenance, meaty broths, salty fish, and herbs freshly gathered from market stalls. The air carries the faint aroma of burnt bread crusts, drying herbs, and the earthy undertone of unwashed hands. It's enough to stir the appetite, a gentle reminder that hunger sharpens the senses, like the subtle tension just before the first note of a lute. The table is a modest stage, rough-hewn wood, scarred by the knives of many meals past, covered now by a faded cloth, perhaps once bright, but now carrying the stains and memories of countless gatherings. There are no polished silverware sets here, only a few wooden trenchers, cracked but sturdy, and clay bowls that have seen better days. You notice a set of small, jagged knives carved from bone, each one a personal talisman, and a spoon hewn from darkened wood, shaped by a craftsman long gone. Utensils are few, and the act of eating is a deliberate ritual, an extension of the hand, a communion of roughened fingertips and bread crusts. A ragged cloth serves as a napkin, and a basin nearby hints at the importance of clean hands before the meal begins. Though in truth, cleanliness is a fleeting virtue in this world. The menu of the day is humble but honest. For the common folk, it's a simple pottage, a thick, nourishing stew of beans, barley, and root vegetables, slow-cooked overnight, the aroma rising in lazy tendrils that tease your nostrils with promises of warmth. Perhaps a piece of coarse bread, dark and dense as a forest floor, is broken into chunks, soaking up the broth. A slice of aged cheese, firm and salty, waits in the corner alongside a handful of eggs laid by the village hens. On days of good fortune, you might find dried onions or a sprig of wild thyme, their flavors sharp and bright, cutting through the richness. On the rarest days, a salted fish, its flesh grey and firm, adds a salty punch, a reminder of distant waters and scarce supplies. In contrast, the tables of the elite are laden with roasted meats, pork, lamb, or even venison, spiced with rare peppercorns or saffron, their vibrant hues a splash of luxury amid the duller tones of daily life. Elegant dishes are finished with a drizzle of honey or a dusting of sugar, an indulgence as rare as a clear sky during a storm. Fruits dried or preserved in sweet syrups adorn the tables like jewel-toned treasures. Fine wines flow in goblets of coloured glass, catching the candlelight and turning it into a sparkling cascade. But here, in the humble corners, the drink of choice is a weak ale, cloudy, slightly bitter, and capable of dulling the ache of hunger or the sting of a hard day. Before you eat, a prayer is whispered, perhaps a plea for gratitude or a blessing for the meal's sustenance. Hands are washed in a basin of cold water, the rough cloth wiping away dirt and sweat, a ritual that marks respect for the simple act of nourishing the body. The order of service is strict. The lord or master is served first, a gesture of hierarchy, their plate carefully measured out, perhaps a chunk of roasted meat and a slice of bread. The others follow, each receiving their share, the distribution reflecting the social fabric woven into every meal. Days of fasting or religious observance are marked by abstinence, no meat on certain days, fish instead, or a shared loaf of bread broken in silence. These routines serve as quiet reminders of faith and discipline woven into the fabric of daily life like the threads of a well-stitched garment. As you settle, the textures come alive. Crisp crusts that crackle when broken, steaming broths that warm your fingers as you lift a spoonful, the roughness of bread that scratches your palate but satisfies a deep, primal hunger. The senses are heightened, the tang of vinegar on a piece of fish, the sharp bite of garlic that lingers on your tongue, the faint sweetness of dried figs tucked into a corner of the table. The sounds are a gentle symphony, clinking of wooden utensils, the muffled chatter of neighbors exchanging news, the crackle of firewood burning, and the distant call of a hawk overhead. You can almost taste the faint, smoky aroma drifting in from a nearby hearth, mingling with the spicy scent of herbs drying in bundles. The hunger, sharp and persistent, is a constant companion, an ever-present reminder that survival hinges on these daily acts of gathering and sharing. Unlike modern meals, where convenience often masks the effort, here each morsel is a small victory, a fragment of life pulled from scarcity. Wasted bread is a rare sight. Instead, stale bits are repurposed into thick bread puddings or fed to the animals. Bones are cracked open for every remaining drop of marrow, and vegetable scraps are tossed into the compost or left in the corner for the pigs. It's a world where abundance is a distant dream, and the act of eating becomes a poetry of necessity, each taste sharpening the senses and anchoring you in the moment. And after the last crumb is savoured or set aside, the village begins to breathe again, the air thick with the aroma of leftover herbs and the faint, lingering smoke. Yet, even as hunger subsides, the evening calls forth something more: music, laughter, and the small acts of defiance that turn darkness into a fleeting moment of light. Soon the streets will fill with the clatter of footsteps, the strum of a lute, the raucous shouts of tavern talk. The meal, humble as it is merely the opening act, an intimate prelude to the lively chaos of the night, where stories are spun, songs are sung, and the simple joy of being together becomes a treasure more valuable than gold. As sombras alongam-se pelas paredes de pedra, enquanto as lanternas de óleo tremeluzem, lançando um brilho dourado sobre as ruas de paralelepípedos enlameados e sobre as praças onde a vida ainda pulsa. Você caminha lentamente, sentindo o cheiro de cerveja morna misturado ao aroma de serragem molhada, enquanto risos contidos ecoam por entre as ruelas. O rastro de fumaça de lareiras e fogueiras dispersa-se no ar frio, carregando o calor de muitas histórias que se entrelaçam na penumbra. As vozes se fundem em uma espécie de murmúrio contínuo, uma melodia de cotidiano que só a comunidade consegue entender. Ao chegar na taverna, o cenário revela-se como um pequeno universo de caos e acolhimento. O banco de madeira está um pouco bamba, rangendo sob cada movimento, enquanto o balcão escuro, polido pela mão de muitos anos, reflete uma luz tênue. No fogo crepitante da lareira, as cinzas dançam na penumbra, enviando faíscas que parecem pequenas estrelas caindo do céu. Dentro, o ambiente é uma mistura de poeira, suor e esperança, onde jogos de dados rolam com o som de promessa e decepção ao mesmo tempo. Os dados feitos de osso ou pedra caem na mesa como uma promessa de sorte, e muitas vezes caem igual boleto no fim do mês. Os dedos tamborilando nas mesas acompanham canções desafinadas, mas calorosas, enquanto copos tilintam em uma dança de alegria e rotina. Você pode até participar com uma risada que mistura entusiasmo e ceticismo, enquanto uma partida de Nine Men's Morris se desenrola lentamente, as peças de madeira deslizando com o som de uma promessa quebrada. A conversa sobe e desce, um fluxo de palavras que revela as pequenas vitórias e perdas da noite. No canto, alguém desafina uma cantiga, a voz rouca tentando acompanhar o ritmo de uma rabeca que geme, enquanto o tambor acompanha a batida de botas, marcando passos simples em roda. O suor escorre pelas faces, misturado à poeira do dia, dando ao momento uma qualidade quase sagrada de esforço comum. Depois da diversão na taberna, você segue para uma rua iluminada por tochas e velas, onde as festas e celebrações tomam conta do calendário. As procissões de velas tremeluzentes sobem pelas ladeiras, carregando os fiéis em uma marcha silenciosa ou cantada, cheias de cheiro de cera derretida e ervas queimadas. Nas praças, teatros improvisados aparecem com figurinos toscos, feitos de tecidos velhos e papelão, onde encena-se um milagre ou um mistério. As pessoas assistem com reverência e risos, rindo de si mesmas ao verem personagens que representam a moralidade com uma honestidade tão bruta quanto as roupas rasgadas. Em dias de festa, o ar enche-se com o cheiro de pão assando, de vinho espumando em copos de barro, de frutas secas e especiarias caras. As músicas de alaúde, rabeca, flautas e tambores preenchem o espaço com uma cadência que desafia a escuridão, convidando todos a uma dança de passos simples, onde o suor mistura-se ao perfume de lã úmida e ao calor de corpos que desejam esquecer, por momentos, o peso do mundo. Porém, nem tudo é luz nesse cenário de celebração. Quando o céu escurece completamente, os flagelantes aparecem na rua, suas vestes rasgadas e suas tochas tremendo na mão, trazendo consigo sermões cortantes como lâminas. Os fiéis e curiosos se reúnem enquanto eles passam, passos ritmados, dedos apontando para o céu, almas penitentes que cortam a noite com preces e açoites. Alguns assistem com olhos arregalados, outros com um olhar distante, como se a própria moralidade estivesse sendo desfiada ali, diante de seus olhos. Os que se deixam levar pelos rituais parecem dançar uma coreografia antiga, uma dança entre a fé e o medo, onde cada chicotada ecoa como um sussurro de que a vida e a morte estão sempre entrelaçadas. Se você for o doutor da peste, seu olhar é uma mistura de respeito e cautela. Mesmo na alegria, alguém pede um conselho rápido, uma palavra que possa aliviar ou assustar, e você toca à beira do beiral do mundo, afastando maus presságios com um gesto sutil, uma bênção que atravessa o ar carregado de fumaça de lenha e ervas queimadas. Você sente as mãos de alguém estendendo-se, buscando proteção, e sabe que, neste momento, sua presença é ao mesmo tempo uma esperança e uma sombra. O ritmo da noite é uma mistura de risos e inquietação, de passos descompassados e de silêncio que se insinua como uma sombra mais densa do que a própria escuridão. A dança desafia a noite, o canto desafia o silêncio, enquanto o sino ao longe responde com uma nota longa e triste, lembrando que toda festa conhece o preço do silêncio. Quando a última nota se apaga, o sino responde, lembrando que toda festa conhece o preço do silêncio. Rimos, dançamos, vivemos. E ainda assim, a cidade guarda seu costume mais antigo: nascer, prometer, partir. E assim, entre uma canção e outra, ela continua, respirando, celebrando, esperando o próximo ciclo que virá, como uma roda de moinho que nunca para de girar. A respiração desacelera lentamente, enquanto o silêncio é preenchido pelo suspiro suave de uma cidade que, como sempre, respira com o ritmo das estações. Lá fora, o murmúrio distante de vozes, o tilintar de panelas e o canto de um pássaro ao longe parecem manter-se como um lembrete de que a vida continua, mesmo na quietude da noite. Aqui, no seu refúgio, cada instante é uma pequena eternidade. O cheiro de sabão rústico, misturado ao aroma de flores secas, ao lado de uma vela, apagando-se devagar, como um coração que se acalma. Você fecha os olhos por um momento, ouvindo o leve choro de um recém-nascido na casa ao lado, um som tão frágil quanto a esperança de um novo dia. A água morna do banho de parto, o pano áspero que toca a pele, a oração sussurrada em silêncio, tudo se mistura na memória de um nascimento que, apesar do medo, traz um milagre repetido, a continuidade. Ali, sob o véu de simplicidade, o primeiro choro soa como um sino minúsculo, marcando a chegada de alguém que, mesmo na sua fragilidade, já faz parte do grande ciclo da vida. Ainda na porta da igreja, uma jovem de mãos trêmulas recebe a bênção, suas mãos entrelaçadas com as de um homem, que talvez será seu marido por conveniência ou por promessa de proteção. A fita que amarra suas mãos parece um símbolo da união que se firma ali, sob olhares atentos da comunidade. O pão e o sal, colocados sobre a mesa ou entregues com solenidade, carregam o peso de promessas silenciosas. Cada gesto, cada palavra, reforça a esperança de uma vida compartilhada, mesmo que o futuro seja uma incógnita, tecida de obrigações e sonhos pequenos. Os velhos, com suas mãos marcadas pelo tempo, passam de geração em geração o ofício, o segredo, a tradição. O banco de madeira da cozinha, marcado por anos de histórias, é testemunha silenciosa de conselhos de avós, de risos abafados e de lágrimas guardadas em silêncio. Em dias de doença, a casa se transforma num espaço de cuidado, onde a unção e as rezas murmuradas tentam aliviar o peso do corpo e do espírito. No entanto, quando a peste ou a morte vem à porta, tudo muda de tom. Os rituais se tornam rápidos, quase esquecidos, enquanto o silêncio pesado cobre as casas vazias. Você, como médico ou curandeiro, sente a impotência de um cuidado que pode ser apenas uma oração ou uma água ungida, enquanto o peso do sofrimento se faz mais denso. O sino grave toca na praça, chamando os fiéis para um funeral silencioso. As velas derretem lentamente, pingando cera sobre a terra fria, enquanto as mãos trêmulas seguram uma cruz de madeira ou uma pedra simples. A sepultura, muitas vezes uma vala comum discreta, guarda os nomes esquecidos por poucos, enquanto a oração de uma comunidade se ergue como uma prece que atravessa o tempo. Lembra-se das imagens dos vitrais coloridos, das pinturas de dança macabra que decoram igrejas e capelas, e das caveiras que nos lembram da humildade perante a vida efêmera. Como o Eclesiastes ensina, há um tempo para nascer e um tempo para morrer, e cada ciclo é uma lembrança constante de que tudo aqui passa, uma roda que gira, uma estação que muda, uma vela que se consome lentamente até apagar-se. Você fecha a janela, escuta o sussurro do vento e respira fundo, sentindo que a vida, com toda a sua simplicidade e sua finitude, é um milagre repetido a cada manhã. Cada pão partido, cada caneca erguida, cada riso que ecoa por uma rua vazia é uma pequena celebração de que o ciclo continua silencioso e implacável, mas também cheio de beleza e esperança. Agora, enquanto a noite avança e o sono lhe envolve lentamente, permita-se agradecer por essa jornada de momentos fugazes, de promessas e despedidas, de vidas que se entrelaçam na eterna dança de nascer, amar e partir. A vela diminui, mas o calor fica. Feche os olhos. A cidade continua e você também.